Hello and welcome to Living Stones, a podcast of conversations with the people of Red Mountain Community Church, highlighting the victories and struggles, the snapshots and stories of the people sitting right next to you on Sunday morning. I'm Peter Franson from Spirit Blade Productions and your fellow seat warmer at Red Mountain Community Church. My co-host today is Ryan Broushet, our pastor of junior high ministry, aka Legend of the Apex.
Oh, man.
Are you? I don't know. You were playing at some at the men's retreat, right?
I was playing at the men's retreat. And yeah, I average like a kill a game. I'm better at Apex than Fortnite, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll take it.
Do you think, as one who has your fingers on the pulse of the hot new trends, do you think this is the thing that parents need to be aware of now and just like aware of what Apex Legends is? Or is it not quite the hotness yet?
Yeah, it's not quite the hotness yet.
Okay.
There was a second, everybody was like, oh, dude, all the streamers on Twitch are going to get passed up with Apex, and it's going to be better than Fortnite and all that, and it just didn't happen. So Fortnite's still number one. Parents are still more concerned about that game than they are about Apex Legends.
Okay.
And yeah, we're going to be okay.
All right, so parents, just settle. This is nothing to get stressed about. Just focus your efforts still on learning how to play Fortnite.
Yep.
And then you'll have mastered everything about parenting.
There you go. You heard it here first.
I can't remember if I asked you this last time, Ryan, but I asked Hallie this question last month, and I thought it would be a good one for you too, if I can put you on the spot. What would you say, just kind of given your wiring, like what your natural inclinations are, as well as your skill set and stuff like that, strengths, weaknesses, all that factored in. I want to know the most fun or natural part of your job, and then I want you to follow that with the hardest or most challenging part of your job.
Okay.
Just off the top of your head.
Off the top of my head.
You can say that you have the freedom to change this answer as soon as we're done recording.
Oh, great.
But just tell me what pops into your head right now.
Okay. So most naturally part of my job.
Yeah. Fun and natural.
I love being able to create how we use our space. So whether that's creating Wednesday nights, creating events, creating certain ways that we do meetings as a junior high staff, and then delegating things out. So when it comes to essentially that blend between administrative and relational, I love to make that a creative space for me and kind of go places with that. So whether that means we're going to be doing a night of just board games or mafia, card mafia, and like some desserts with students, or whether that means that our staff is going to go out for a Christmas party and do like an escape room, all of that sort of gather and then get creative with it. I love that.
So are you talking specifically about like the planning stages of that,
yes,
the vision,
planning.
And like here's an idea, and here's how we can make it come together?
Yeah, I'm like halfway in between vision guy and like admin guy, so I like to call myself ideas guy.
Okay. So how about like the hardest or most challenging part?
Yeah, the hardest or most challenging part of junior high ministry, I would say is, so for me, I'm in this really interesting time where I'm trying to grow into being a better teacher of the word and continuing to refine my teaching and my teaching style and how we do information and formation together. So whether that's discussion times and teaching or just me preaching or me trying to use different avenues in that, I'm finding what's getting harder and harder for me is that as I'm growing as a teacher and being trained in how to do this with the guys around me and resources here and what I'm reading and learning, I feel like it's really hard sometimes to not just go past or above or through maybe where my students are at. And so being able to teach well and teach intuitively for 12, 13, 14-year-olds rather than trying to prove something myself by learning information and then throwing that at students like they can catch that or like they're getting that or trying to impress the room more than actually teaching.
Yeah.
And so I find that really difficult because I'll really rile myself up in trying to get after some theological or interpretive nugget that literally no one else cares about except me. But I make it such a big deal. And that can kind of, I think that has the potential to really hurt the understanding of what I'm trying to teach more than help it sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's something.
If I can affirm you for a moment, I thought that like the approach you had at the men's retreat when you shared just some of your background and you had this really confessional style. It was very biblically based, but it was also just you sharing your own journey and wrestlings and stuff like that. And so I think that there's a real strength in your potential. I don't, and I know that that's not going to work for every situation and dealing with junior high students and stuff like that. But I was really blessed by that. And gosh, any of you guys that missed the men's retreat, you missed out. You missed out on something special.
Oh, thanks,
so,
P. Appreciate that, man.
Thank you. All right, so for the weird off the wall, we got to have some gimmick, right? Because you kids, you won't listen to the podcast unless we get all wacky. Got to be weird and wacky. Got to have a gimmick. Dance, monkey, dance. So here's the gimmicky question this time, and that is, what is your favorite sound?
Okay, so my favorite sound, it's definitely rolling clouds in the distance, like thunder that's not too far away, but also not that close, and like rain before it starts pouring, like the pit pat, like a little bit, like, oh, is it raining? Kind of rain?
Yeah.
And then the thunder rolling up, but not like the storm, like, oh my gosh, I gotta plug my ears.
Yeah.
And not like the heavy rain where it's just like, and it just sounds like white noise. It's like that nice in-between sweet spot. So like if you go camping up north, you get about 15 minutes of that, and then boom, you're in it.
That's
But
got to be an
anyways.
Arizona thing, right? Did you grow up in Arizona?
Yeah, I did. I did grow up in Arizona.
I think
right.
I think if you ask people like in Washington,
Right.
they'd be like, I don't want to hear rain.
Ever again. No,
But,
no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, I can relate to that.
Dude, I love that spot. It's a sweet spot. So I'm like, I got to open up the windows now, or I got to go stand outside now and catch it before it becomes too extreme either way.
I've got my birthday coming up, and so my wife always likes to get a list from me so she's not in the dark, and frankly, I like giving her a list because I'm selfish, and I like to get things that I like. But I came up with nothing this time because, I was just, I had no ideas. And then I realized, I know what I want. And so I sent her a link to one of those humidifiers that like, what do you call it? There's a name for it. There's a spinning disc inside the humidifier. It's a cool mist humidifier. So when you turn this on, it's got this nice hum, but then on top of that, it's got the, and it's a nice cool mist.
Peter, I have no idea what you're explaining, but the way you're explaining it is amazing.
Okay.
So I'm locked in.
Well, here's the thing. I think that this is a technology that is totally being phased out. In fact, this was one of the only ones that you could buy still, and it was really overpriced. But like when I was a kid and I would get sick, if it was like a congestion thing or whatever,
right.
You would use these humidifiers, and you can get warm mist humidifiers. I think those are a lot more common, but these humidifiers are used to help loosen up all the gunk that you got in your system.
Truly.
And so I began to associate feelings of rest and recuperation and being all snuggly warm in my bed and not going to school and reading, comics or whatever with this sound, and with the feeling of the mist on my face, And I was like,
I'm there with you, dude. You visually described it all. Okay.
And I'm like, hey, I'm 40. I'm dealing with all kinds of stressful thoughts that are ramping up a little bit. And yes, this would be a Band-Aid on a cannonball wound. So yeah, I'm pursuing other spiritual disciplines to deal with my junk. But I was like, gosh, I would like a sound. I would like this experience that I associate with rest and recuperation. And
dude.
I'm really looking forward to my birthday because I think I'm going to get it.
I'm looking forward to it for you as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. I've lost my script here. Transition.
Great.
Earlier today, Ryan and I spent some time talking with Marina Stender,
right.
who grew up in Russia. And actually, during when it was still the Soviet Union, she was there for a lot of that. And she talks about what a formative experience that was for her, and especially when it comes to the spiritual things in life and just her journey to faith, which started in some ways in Russia and then continued in some really interesting ways when she came to America. It's like a multi-tiered, multi-layered story. I'm not going to spoil anything. Let's just get into it right now. thank you, Marina, for being willing to sit down and do this with us. I've been really curious to just kind of hear about your story and your background. I just got a little bit of a skeleton of it, but I didn't want to hear, all the details. I like to hear all those fresh, while we're sitting and talking. But thank you for being willing to do this with us.
Of course. It's an awesome privilege.
Your church background is relatively unique, as well as kind of like your national background. Where did you grow up?
Yes, so I know with my Russian accent, people probably, I know you guys know I'm Russian. Usually I make people
what?
guess.
You're Russian?
I say, hey, take 3 guesses, and it's amazing what you can find out. People think, where are you from? But
where do they usually, if not Russia, where do they say?
Like I heard Brazil, I heard New York, which is like, maybe Brooklyn, and there's a lot of Russians there. But
okay.
Greece, like all over the place. But Eastern European is most of the time. And then they try to get it on the map. And I would say, no, it's East. It's the bigger. And it's amazing how people don't know geography sometimes. But anyways, I grew up in Moscow, which is the capital of Russia.
The capital of Russia.
Yes,
okay.
The cool place. When I grew up there, it was called the Soviet Union. That was the country. Now it's separated, and there were 15 republics before. Russia is the country now that's separated from Soviet Union, and Moscow is where I grew up. My family, my mom had a long roots in Russia. They were generations of her family that lived in Russia. Then my dad was actually from Armenia, which is, I don't know if the listeners know, but that's part of like south of Russia, south of Caucasus. And they met in Moscow. He went to conservatory there. He was actually an orchestra conductor.
Oh, that's super cool.
Studied for that, and that's where they met. And they lived in Moscow, and that's where I was born.
Cool. I am one of those like dumb Americans that doesn't know. I usually say I'm not good at geology.
You're not. Geology.
Or like geography, Peter, geography. So this is going to be hopefully a little bit educational for me and fun. What are some of like maybe just your general memories of growing up, just what it was like growing up in Russia?
Yeah, so I guess the best way to put it would be, I lived there for 20 years before I came here. So those 20 years, I think that they were kind of radically different, the childhood part from the teens years. The reason was obviously there were a lot of changes in Russia when I was a teen, but I guess I'll start with my childhood, give you guys a little background. So it was very happy, careless childhood. I grew up, I was born into a loving family. I was an only child, so I was a little spoiled. My grandparents played a really strong role. They were around all the time. My parents worked. But I guess why I say it's careless, even though there was nothing on the shelves, there were, shortages of basic services and supplies. Everybody was in the same boat. And there was togetherness. People were kind of equal. Everybody lived in the same, I lived on the 8th floor of this 12-story apartment building.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All my friends lived in the similar housing accommodations. Everybody had like a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. We all went to school. We all had the same kind of things, breakfast, lunch, dinner. We all wear uniforms. But
so you really felt the positive community that comes with communism, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And that's good you say that, because yes, I was a very kind of thought to obey the rules, respect the elderly.
Yeah.
There were some really good things that we were taught to be disciplined in the ways we behave ourselves, and that resonated with me.
Yeah.
And then my parents worked. My mom was an engineer. My dad was, like I said, he was in music. And we were, kind of a middle class, I guess. Everybody was a middle class. There wasn't really I didn't ever witness severe poverty or the riches. Everybody was kind of that huge middle class.
Okay.
We had a summer house outside of Moscow. We would go there. The Russians called it dacha. We would get there every summer for 3 months. You're in the woods, you know,
Nice.
you like berry picking, mushroom picking.
Sounds
It's
like frolicking through the fields. I love it.
It's like the cabins people here sometimes have in Payson. We have
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And most Muscovites fled to those...
Did you say Muscovites?
Muscovites, people
Wow.
that lived in Moscow.
I like that.
Love to get out of the city.
Okay.
So that was, the childhood was pretty happy. I didn't realize I was very much influenced by a lot of the communist views, Soviet views. The only thing, I guess, was maybe negative. And I remember that being awake at nights as I would be questioning my life purpose. And how's that all going to end? One day I'm just going to die. My parents going to die. My grandparents, who I love so much, just going to all perish. Like, what's the purpose of all of that, our existence on this earth?
How old would you guess you were when you were having those kinds of thoughts?
Probably like 6, maybe 7.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty
Wow.
early on. I
Okay.
don't know why. I was always, I know why God probably wanted me to start seeking. I would come to my parents, who were the product of the communism. They didn't grow up with any Christianity, anything like that. So they couldn't really comfort me in any good way. So I remember that pretty vividly.
Do you remember by chance what they might have said, what they did say, like to try to comfort you?
Knowing my parents, and then go back to sleep. Nonsense. Talk. I mean, we were not in my household really deep discussing those kind of things with 6-year-old or 7-year-old even.
Sure.
They just kind of said, okay, that's annoying. Get back to bed. So I would. But then the teen years kind of coincided with the beginning of Gorbachev era. You guys know it was like 1985 where everything started changing. Perestroika, have you heard that word before?
No.
Perestroika, basically it's the changes. I mean, there were...
Okay.
The Soviet state regime was crumbling. Gorbachev was I still like what he has done. He introduced freedom of speech, democracy. All of that came into my world, and I was a teen in that.
Amazing. That's 1985, you said,
1985, yeah.
That's not even that long ago. So
Not
Yeah.
that long ago. For you.
for me,
For me, it's like I don't know. It's a long time ago. It seems like, because I was Russia, and now I'm here, and I have family, and it's just like a whole
Russia to
different
Arizona.
world.
Yeah, totally. It has to be like polar opposite.
Yeah, and I want to get to that. But before we get there, were you connected to or influenced by any forms of Christianity while you were in Russia?
So the Christianity, I don't know if you guys know about Russia. The pre-Soviet Russia was actually a Christian. It was a Russian Orthodoxy. They are Eastern Orthodox. That was the belief since 9th century. That was introduced. The Christianity was introduced to Russia, and they were very strong Russian churches. It was pretty much the last living czar, Nicholas II, who was killed by the communists during the revolution. He was the head of the church. So he was actually like the bishop,
This is
as well as
incredible.
the czar.
9th century to then.
Yeah, that
Okay.
was like the beginning of 20th century when the revolution happened in Russia in 1917. So for the 20 years, 1917 through like 37, there were over 200,000 clergy killed, murdered.
Oh my gosh.
There was widespread persecution of the church. And basically, they did a really good job destroying the church buildings. They were just being blown up. People were persecuted if you were a believer. So my grandmother, though, she was born into, I think, a very strong family of faith.
Okay.
That was early in the 20th century. So I did see glimpses of that she had faith. She was like the most loving and kind person I've ever met. She was a big part of my life. Like I said, my parents were at work all day long. She was the one that was cooking for me and with me and just showing me the love of Christ. I didn't know it at the time, but now I can see how her whole story, her life, and just being such a giver and just living for others spoiled me rotten. I mean, that was the down part of her being so loving, but she was. I did see her on her knees. I did hear her praying under her breath a lot throughout the day. I didn't understand. She didn't, like I said, we weren't ever discussing things in the family. It wasn't like, I know maybe it's more typical of a Russian family not being so deeply emotionally, I guess, describing things and how you feel. And it was just like, this is what you do, and you move on with your life. And but she never really explained things to me about her beliefs, but she did drag me to church a couple of times.
Okay, so there were churches.
There were still some churches.
Okay,
and in
why
Moscow,
were they allowed to exist and the other ones were destroyed? Do you know?
There were several that were destroyed in Moscow, like the huge cathedral. I know they rebuilt it now. But outside of Moscow, I think it was a lot easier for the socialists to destroy those, as nobody knew. There were still foreigners living in Moscow and visiting Moscow during the Soviet times. And it was a big, dark, I guess, spot on the socialist regime. So there were some agreements made, I think, from like the English church and American, that the Russia allows some religion to remain in Russia.
So Moscow
made
it really visible.
Did have a few churches, and they were not very well attended. They were just grandmas there. Anytime I go there, what you guys say, babushkas, even though it's pronounced babushka, it really means grandmother, but that's what you see at churches. Just some old ladies, there's no youth there. There was no Sunday schools there. There was nothing being taught. There were very strict Orthodox churches. There were no benches. You just stand up and you sometimes hear the priest, they just kind of walk around and do the ceremonial things. And you come to, they had all this icons. There was it's similar a little bit to Catholics.
Yeah, okay.
That they pray to Virgin Mary, they pray to saints. So my grandmother would go and she would take me with her. It didn't do anything for me other than, when can we get out of here and can I get my ice cream that you promised before you drag me in here?
Yeah, sure.
The other thing, my grandma insisted on baptizing me, which is baptizing there more like christening, which is you don't really have to believe. It's just a ceremonial.
Yeah.
But she believed in her heart that was going to help me and that was going to still solidify me with, get me in or something. So I think at the age of maybe 12, this time it wasn't just ice cream. It was like some really cool toy that I requested, if that was ever. Yeah, so I got something out of it, but I was sworn to secrecy. Like I couldn't really tell anybody about that in school, teachers, friends, because that would not go out well. I mean, they could get a phone call or whatever. So I remember they gave me a little cross as I finished my baptism, put it over my neck. As soon as I got home, I took that off and I threw it behind like the tallest closet. And I said, okay, that's it. That ends right here. And that was pretty much, I think that, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Christianity.
Yeah, I'm interested in kind of the climate of Russia at the time that you were there. I asked my family getting ready for this interview. I was like, well, if you were in Russia, just found yourself in Russia, and you could speak one phrase in Russian, what phrase would you want to know how to say? My youngest son Titus is 8, and he said I would want to know how to say "How are you today?" My wife Holly chose "Where is the bathroom?" I chose "Where is the American embassy?" I am a dumb American. Please help me.
Oh, boy.
Get me out of here now.
And my oldest said, "Do you believe in Jesus?" And I said, well, that would be a really interesting question to ask, because my impression, I told him, is that a lot of people there don't like Jesus, or at the very least are not interested in Jesus. So how would you describe the climate toward Christianity that you that you particularly felt? What was it? How do you think growing up in communist Russia affected your view of God and Christianity at the time?
Yes. So, have you ever heard this saying, religion is the opium of the people?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that Marx?
Marx.
Man.
There you go. So that's Marx in like 1800s. The saying that communists took and impounded into our heads. So we grew up in school, that's what we believed. We had, not any glimpses of Jesus, but, portraits of Marx and Lenin on every wall. And we were taught that that's how people who are uneducated or needed something, they didn't really understand science. This is something that they could believe to explain the world to them. We have first men in space, right? And I think 1961 in Russia, Gagarin went into space. He looked, there's no God there. We even went to space. Our science at that time,
That's an amazing way to create arguments for no belief at all. Marxism, just like, hey, it's outdated. And then look, we're in space and we have science. That's an incredible way to pound that in.
We have images of the space.
Yeah.
Look, kids, this is what a man can do. So that was, man can do all things. Man is smart enough. You guys are being born in this bright future of building communism, building this world that no one else has. And you don't need that. You are smarter than that. We're educating you to know that you can you pretty much work hard, you do the right thing, and you can explain the masses that they don't need to be controlled by something as silly as, God, Jesus, Holy Spirit. That pretty much was it. I mean, in my teen years, again, all of that started crumbling away, where we saw that everything they were telling us about the bright future, that was not so. That there were millions of people that perished during communist time for their beliefs, for opposition to politics. All this started coming out, and there was the freedom of speech, where we were just bombarded with that information. That was chaotic, and as a teen processing that, basically, there was a lot of other things, the Western pop culture, and that came in flooding in. The first McDonald's that opened in Moscow. We stood in line
that had to have been kind of cataclysmic to have a McDonald's open up.
I know.
The symbolism behind that is incredible, because it's like, here's the West entering in, and everything we've been inundated with just goes away with
It's like
free market capitalism.
The West is not the evil that we thought it was. I stood in line for 2.5 hours to get my first Big Mac. And it was like, woohoo,
How was it? Was it worth the 2 hours?
It was, because we've never tasted anything like that. And just the concept of, it's just like the Russians just have a sandwich with like a meat on top. There's like other stuff on top, and then another bun. And
another bun.
The bun had like the little sesame seeds on.
What are they thinking?
Oh, and the packaging and all. It was just, we've never seen anything like this.
Wow.
So all of that is what I was preoccupied with. I was just after, wow, what's the Western world like? It was very exciting to me. Other people, like my grandfather, who was a very honest man of high integrity, lived his whole life to build a bright future for his kids and grandkids. All of a sudden, all of that was just lies. Suffered heart attack after heart attack. It was really hard on him. But for me, being a teenager, I was super excited about the changes. And I'm sure that there were missionaries that came flooding in too. We did hear about a lot of the missionaries that came in from, the Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons, and those came in pretty quickly. And we were very opposed. We were warned that there were, different kind of societies that they get you in and you can't get out. So that even scared me more away from religion. Wow, now that the Westerns are coming in and they have all these weird groups and weird churches, we don't understand anything about any of that,
Maybe it sounds really overwhelming.
Yeah, it was. And so for a teenager like myself, I'm just like, okay, well, not interested.
So you had this experience where suddenly the West was coming to you, and that had a sense of fascination with it, but also a lot of caution with it. But then at some point, you find yourself coming to the United States. So what brought you to the United States, and how old were you when you left Russia to come here?
Right. So, yes, like I said, I was kind of drawn into what else is out there. All of the things they were telling us about the West is not true. Maybe I'll go find out for myself. But it kind of happened that I met someone from the U.S. My friend was dating an American, and he had a friend visiting. So that was how I met my future husband, not the one I have now.
Okay.
That one. So after dating, I was 19 years old. I was just completely not sure. I was already a student in a civil engineering university in Moscow for 3 years, but I decided to leave all that, not even graduate, and go. He proposed to me, so I thought, hey, cool. I go and get
to
go to America. So that's how I came here. He happened to live in Phoenix, Arizona. I came here when I was 20 years old, and we got married, and it was a complete culture shock. It's not what I thought the state was going to be like. What we saw were more like high scrapers in New York and all of that stuff, big billboards. And 1993, Phoenix was.
Hey, I was born
there
that
was
year.
like farmlands and no people on the streets, and it was just like
couple cows.
wow, yeah. I was totally shocked. It was not what I envisioned it to be.
And hot.
I came in October. I actually came on the 31st of October, which was Halloween, which we didn't know anything about either. I arrived at LAX. I remember coming out of LAX and seeing people dressed up and like weird stuff. Man. And my fiance at that time took me to Denny's. I think it was like the only thing open that
legendary
late, and there were crazy people there too. So,
oh my gosh,
yeah, I was not prepared for what I saw. I was doubting whether I made the right choice coming here.
Sure,
but I was determined. Like I said, I was always thought to work hard and study, and so I went to
had those values
Phoenix Community College. Tried to get my English to the point where I could attend university and finish my civil engineering.
Did you already know
studies.
English before you got out?
It was rusty.
Okay.
It was not. I mean, like I could communicate enough. I had my little dictionary with me at all times. Didn't even have anything like we do now, little app with the translator.
Oh, yeah.
Had to look things up frantically. So
yeah, Google Translate, not there yet.
So yeah, but since I came here in my 20s, I didn't really know English well enough to go study and continue my education at ASU. I was home a lot and just watch a lot of soap operas. And I learned my English that way. It's kind of funny.
What? That's cool.
But I remember, it was like I Love Lucy was at, I don't remember, 9:30 in the morning. Then there was another one of those older shows, and then started like the Oprah and all of those other ones. So I watched like all of them. And within a couple of months, I actually spoke pretty good English.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So did the change of location and all that culture change too, did that have any effect on your view of spiritual matters at all?
I guess not in my 20s.
Okay.
My early 20s, I didn't really... the guy I married turned out to... he wasn't a believer, and he was abusive, not physically, but mentally. Just very controlling. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really have many experiences outside of home. Like, he wouldn't introduce me to people. Oh. He was kind of like just, work home kind of guy. And even I met a couple of people when I started going to Phoenix Community College, and they were Russian immigrants. And a lot of those people came here through a Jewish refugee lines. But also, they're in the same boat as me. They came from a non-believing atheist Russia of my time. So I didn't really have any Christian friends or any influences at that time that I can call that. Or maybe they were, and I just didn't pay attention, or I just didn't find that was anything that I was interested in. So
what would you say as you kind of got settled in here? What did you start to pursue? What did your life become about? What were you pursuing?
So the American dream, right?
Oh, okay.
All right.
The American
I like
dream. That's you could see the opportunities. How people who work hard, they got to where they wanted in life. It was pretty much self-centered, completely materialistic view of the capitalism, and that might have been also left over from the communist times, where capitalists are basically everybody's work for the good of themselves, and that's what it's all about. And I could see how that could be done if going to school, getting my degree, getting my first internship, and getting my first townhouse, and really working, and getting to drive, my Jeep Wrangler.
Jeep Wrangler. What color was it?
It was green, and it had a little like a bikini top on it. In Arizona in the summer, I didn't have air conditioning, but it was coolest thing that I could actually go and buy that myself.
Yeah.
Being from Russia, that was like the coolest thing. So I don't know. I was into all those things, worldly riches, and that was everyone who were my friends were also immigrants from Russia. I got a divorce at that time. I got out of that bad relationship.
Gotcha.
Met a lot of the people who came from my country too, and it was like, Scottsdale had a really good nightlife. It was a lot of that. We went out every Friday, Saturday night into the clubs and worked Monday through Friday. I was an engineer then. I could support my traveling. I loved traveling. So that was all kind of self-consumed all the way into like my late 20s, when was the first time I think I started waking up finally from that.
What thoughts kind of, you said waking up, what kind of thoughts woke you up from that?
I was getting pretty empty on the inside from that kind of existence. I didn't really feel fulfilled. Got that, been there, done that, and now what? What's next? I was starting to search for something more of depth, and I didn't know what it was. I really didn't think it was God. I was just thinking, maybe I need to get married and have a family, or what was it that's going to fulfill that emptiness inside?
Now, I'm told that when you met
My husband,
your husband,
Chris, yes.
His name is Chris?
Chris.
Okay, great. So I'm told that when you met him, you guys had a ton in common, but you had one very significant difference. So I'm really curious about what you had, some of the things that you had strongly in common, and then what that big difference was.
Yes, so we met, and it was kind of love from the first sight. First date, it was kind of a semi-blind date.
Okay.
Brave woman.
Yes. There's a story behind that, but that's for a different podcast. But anyways, we met and we just started talking, and we had a lot of things in common. Like, he lived in Europe for a couple of years, going to school there. During his university, he did like an exchange program. So he was very well traveled. His undergrad was in history. So like, he knew history of Russia better than me.
Wow.
Like
that has to be impressive.
I was very impressed, especially, I don't know, from someone from Arizona who really, usually I would have to give him a little rundown on Russia and where it is and what's about. But he knew it. He like really knew that he, at that time, was not really walking with the Lord. So the one big difference was that I found out soon enough that he was a believer.
Okay.
And that was shocking to me, because he was educated. He was an attorney. He was very smart. Yesterday I was preparing, just saying, hey, I think one thing that we have in common is we intellectually equal. And he goes, equal? I'm completely superior.
Oh, okay.
Anyways.
Don't you have the engineering degree?
Of course. So I said, no, you mean me. I'm the superior. So anyways, we had a lot of that in common. But when I found out that he actually, in his heart, he strongly believed in God. And he told me that was a big difference, and that I had to find out for myself that is the truth. And I thought he was completely brainwashed by the American. I knew the Americans were, in Russia, even we knew that they were the church goers. On a Sunday, everybody goes to church, and that was kind of we felt that you guys were brainwashed.
Sure.
And not that we were
Yeah.
by evolution theories and all that, but that Americans were. And that
Evolution theories, man. Incredible.
Yeah. So that was a difference between us. And I basically said, okay, fine. Where do you get your beliefs? He said, that's from the Bible. I never held the Bible in my hand until that time. In Russia, we didn't never have a Bible at home. Even now, when I go back and they have Bibles, they're translated or basically they're in the old Russian language that no one uses anymore. The Russian Orthodox Church has not updated its translation of the Bible in the last, I think, 200
Really?
years.
Wow.
200
So
years.
if you've tried to read the Bibles now the Westerners brought the more newer Bibles, the newer translations, but the actual Bible that the Orthodox Church supports is hard to read. So here I found a student Bible, and I said, fine, you think that, this is it? I'm going to read this, and I'm going to prove it to you how this doesn't make any sense. And so that would give me more ammunition in our debates on the biblical. So I was thinking I was going to bring him over to my side.
There we go.
And
With a
open up
student
his
Bible.
eyes. Yeah, open up his eyes. The evolution, the pictures I had from my childhood, of all the little stages of the ape and everything, that's completely was engraved in my brain. So that's where I kind of started reading the Bible.
So were you,
First time.
You kind of mentioned the idea of you guys kind of debating back and forth. Was that something that you both felt comfortable with in your relationship, or did that cause friction, or was that I'm just curious
Yes.
about that dynamic in a relationship. This was an established romantic relationship at this point.
Right.
Had you guys been talking about marriage yet at this point, or was it just an established dating relationship?
We were talking. We were, my husband also been married before, unsuccessfully.
Okay.
So it was for both of us, would have been our second marriage. I was in my late 20s and he was in his 30s. We kind of knew that, this was it. We liked each other. It was a good thing. Him not walking with the Lord at the time, I think God sent me that man for a reason, because he knew that if it was a stronger, he was stronger, he would probably not have been persistent after me and my beliefs, because I would have just been probably insulting to his beliefs. But he wasn't, and he was open for those debates, and he found it interesting, and he found it challenging. That that was a challenge, and he appreciated it.
Cool.
So,
That is so cool.
It actually worked out really good between us.
Wow.
So in the research mode, because you're preparing a debate and you're going point by point, did that start to turn your heart towards, wait, actually, is this true? Like the irony of debating, did that kind of lean you more into belief? Or was it not that cut and dry?
I mean, I remember, of course, I told him I'm going to start in the Old Testament and I'm going to go through it. And my student Bible had a lot of notes. So the
Hey, all you
creation
students
theory.
out there listening, you
Yeah.
hear this? Come on now.
Student Bible. I got it from Borders bookstore, Barnes and Nobles at that time or something.
Nice.
Cool.
And creation, I just started reading through that. That was mind blowing. Like I had no idea that this is how, God created the world. And that I started, of course, there was a lot of things there to debate with my husband on.
Sure.
But he loved to read. So he was very well read, read a lot of things, and was able to help me with some of those. He told me to jump into the New Testament. I remember he said, this is what Jesus did for us. And this is what, the depth of our faith is. And I didn't grow up with even knowing and understanding the Christmas story or the resurrection. None of that. I mean, the Christmas was a work day in Russia. We celebrated like
Rough.
the New Year. It was funny. We had like the New Year evergreen tree. It was not a Christmas tree.
Okay.
It was evergreen. We
All right.
exchanged presents and all that, but it was completely non-religion based. So I didn't hear Christmas story. I didn't know about Christ. I got kind of lost in the Old Testament by myself without attending the church. So I did jump against all my logical mindset into the New Testament, where I actually started. That's what drew me in.
Yeah.
Where I saw how Jesus lived for me and how it was actually a gift that was just there. I still didn't comprehend it, but at least I wasn't as bold in my arguments anymore. I saw the love and the kindness of his sacrifice and his life, and his just sinful or sinless nature
Yeah.
that was there for me. Why, what's so bad about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone gave his life for me.
Yeah.
But again, it was still difficult because we didn't attend the church. We did get married at that time.
Okay.
So we were not church attenders. I had a coworker at my work, and it was a very strong Christian.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I think it was obviously another seed that was being planted. That he would come, and we worked long hours at that time. We had a lot of projects, so he would come over when everybody left, and he would just poke me with those questions. So, what do you believe in? Or being from Russia, and you know that Jesus died for you. You know that if you died today, where would you go? What do you think about that? And sometimes it was irritating, but at other times I was, it was kind of putting thoughts into my head of that I needed to know more. We had our first child. She was 2, and 2 years old, the terrible twos. Again, my coworker said, "Hey, my church has this parenting class on Sundays or Saturdays. I think it was Saturdays. Do you want to come?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "Free childcare, free, completely, all that good stuff." And I said, "Okay, we'll go check it out." So that was my first introduction to a Christian church. It was a church in Phoenix, a Baptist church, very strict Baptist church, but the pastor that taught that class was amazing, man. And I just saw how, I guess, God worked through him. Super gracious, super kind, no judging of me. And sometimes I think some questions I ask obviously were maybe kind of rough about questioning some of the theology behind the parenting, but provided a solid foundation for my parenting. I like that. I like that I could reference the Bible and some things that came from there on how children obey your parents and whatever.
Right.
A lot of that. So that was my first introduction to both of ours, I think, my husband and I, when we came to church, and we actually saw something there.
So then did you guys start going to that church?
No, so we went to the parenting class, and they invited us several times. One time, I think we came on Sunday. I didn't really feel drawn there, and then shortly after we moved to San Diego.
Okay,
Gotcha.
So there, then we got a flyer in the mail, and it was an Easter flyer from a local church, and we thought we'll go check it out. So we came. That church had a beautiful outdoor service.
Oh.
It was like beautiful San Diego weather.
Yeah, in San Diego.
Beautiful
Sounds like the
outdoor
dream.
service, Easter. Pastor Bob was another pastor, also Bob, there at the time. Powerful message. I don't remember what it was, but we decided to start coming, and that's how we started coming to the church. And then from that point, I was seeking, but still kind of busy with parenting and being a new wife, new mother, moving to San Diego, all that stuff. Kind of lost in my Bible reading, I think, at that point. Didn't know what I believed anymore. I was super confused. But again, God was merciful, and he sent another person who was another Russian.
Oh,
But one big difference, she was a Christian.
oh,
She was about my age. She grew up, had the same background, but she accepted Jesus a few years before me.
wow.
And she came to the same church. So
fascinating.
we had 3 girls. They had 3 girls. It was just had a lot in common. Started spending some time. And one time on the hike, we went hiking. She told me her testimony. She told me her story, how she was saved. And that was super powerful for me, thinking that, wow, that's what she thinks, that God did all these things for her, where she is today. And she could really kind of just see the hand of God through her life to where she was. So that was the first time I've ever heard a testimony. Super powerful, guys, your testimonies. And yes, so that was one. And she invited me to come to a Bible study at that church. And they had a women's Bible study on Thursdays. So I came in just to check it out. I remember I sat like in the back, and people kept coming to me saying, "Oh, do you have the book? Did you buy a book?" I said, "I don't want a book. I'm not going to stay. I just want to sit in the back and just see." I was like very cautious still. All the, the brainwashing that I grew up with and how I was influenced was always told me, stay away, do not trust. I still had a lot of that baggage. And so I sat in the back of the church. There was another lady there from Sweden who also came to check things out. And then we sat together, and we were both like from the same kind of, different backgrounds, but in the same way. She was searching for something. She didn't know what, but she wasn't there to stay. And we agreed on that. We supported each other. But again, God was merciful to me. And another lady came after. That was a Beth Moore study that they did at that time.
Classic.
Forgot the name of it, but a lady just came afterward, and she had an accent. She was also from Sweden, and she said, "Hey, I see that you knew. I have a, I lead a table here on Thursdays, and you don't ever have to come again if you don't like something, but just come and check it out next Thursday." So I'm like, okay, fine. She seems kind of nice, has an accent. I can relate to her.
Bonus points for the accent, right?
So I started coming to that. And I'm sure I'm skipping over some things, but
there's no skipping. It's fine.
This was a time where back at home, my grandmother passed away. So 2007, she passes away, and I had to fly back. And the only things that I remember, I was super distressed because she was such a strong person in my life. Like the unconditional love that I've experienced was from her.
Right.
So flying back on the plane, knowing that I'm getting there for a funeral, I'm going to see her that last time, the images of her praying on her knees and praying for me, I started understanding that, you know what, I might have a chance to see her again in that life, afterlife, where I know that's where she is. That's where she is. She was a very strong believer. She was probably praying for me to get here one day. That was super comforting. So that was happening then. 6 months later, my mom suffers a massive stroke, again in Russia. Again, I fly back. That's only a few months later after my grandma passes away. That was her mom. So my mom now has this. I fly back. This time, I don't know if I'm going to find her alive or not. I know she was in intensive care. This time I bring my student Bible with me on the plane, and I'm reading that all the way on a 13-hour flight. And that's, at that point, that is the only thing that's comforting to me. Get there to Russia. She's pretty much paralyzed. I'm in her hospital room. Again, what can I do to my paralyzed mom, besides spoon feed her and do some things like that? She was crying a lot. She was in distress. Obviously, she couldn't speak. That was also paralyzed. But when I read the Bible to her, I found a newer Bible in Russia, and I started just sitting by her bedside and reading it to her. That's when she would stop. The tears would stop rolling, and she would fall asleep.
Wow.
That was super comforting to her. And
Incredible.
But again, I did not make a decision even then yet. That was 2007. 2008, my mom passes away. And then again, God is giving me my third daughter. Looks exactly like my mom. She is born just a few months after my mom passes away. We call her by my grandmother's name, Paulina, and she resembles my mom. I see the hand of God in that. For me, that was so comforting. To my dad, too. He lost his wife, had a granddaughter that looks like, she still looks so much like my mom. So that divine appointment with the Russian friend who testified was in 2009. The first Bible study was like a fall of 2009. And then finally, towards the end of that first Bible study, right before the Christmas of 2009 is when I felt so much turmoil. I was like on fire. I seriously didn't have any peace. I was waking up, and the only thought on my mind was, what are you going to do about God and Christ? What are you going to do about it? Like, I couldn't think about anything else. He was so, I think, fighting for me at the time that I just couldn't just do even my normal daily things of being, parent and wife. And the only thing was on my mind, you have to do something. It's a yes or no, yes or no. It was the question. So I went to a women's pastor's wife, who was also the pastor's, or she was the leader of the Bible study, women's Bible study. And first thing, she comes to me. I was walking to her to kind of with my turmoil. I wanted her to maybe pray for me. Or she said, hey, you know what? I've been praying for you. I have such a strong, I woke up with this message in my mind. God spoke to me that you really needed me today, and I've been praying for you. And is there anything you want to talk to me about? Is there anything you want to ask me? I'm here for you. I have that strong desire to, anything that you need. I feel God has been leading me. I mean, we have 100 women in our Bible study, right? She comes basically
Straight
running
to
to
you.
me when she saw me. I'm running to her. She's running to me. I just started bawling, and I just couldn't speak. I was like, so then, of course, from my, Bible studies, I'm like, okay, what about this? Tell me about the questions to this. I don't understand this. And I went through 10 questions that were just, not settled about Christianity with me, and things in the Bible that I questioned. And she, graciously explained those to me as much as she could. But for the most part, she said, you really need to just go home and just pray. Just be on your own. Just sit down, just pray. And pray that God, gives you the rest of the answers. There will be a lot of questions in your mind always, and it's normal. I don't know.
great wisdom.
I don't know some things, and you won't know, but you need to see what God wants to tell you about that. So that day I went home, I sat down, and I prayed, and I asked Jesus to forgive me and to take me the way I was with all my shortcomings and, sarcasm about, the things that are maybe don't make sense, and all of that baggage, and just help me and take me the way I was, and I would be the best, that I could be to follow him. That's pretty much how it went.
Wow. That is such and it's just an interesting, some people, when they talk about how they came to faith in Christ, it involves some big event, and it's just this one thing. And to hear your story, it being so, layered and such a process over time is really neat to hear, that's one of many ways that people can find themselves being found by Christ. So that's really cool. What now you've been at Red Mountain for a while. What have you come to value about being involved at Red Mountain Community Church, given your background, given the journey that you've been on up to this point?
So we we moved to Mesa. When did we move? 2013. Church seeking. We kind of went through. So a little more background. After I was saved, it was a perfect timing. God's timing is always perfect. I didn't know why it had to happen then, but God knew exactly why. We were up for a major trial with our everything, financial. My husband basically had several lawsuits filed against his law firm. And major stuff. We didn't know if he was going to ever be able to practice law.
Oh, man.
We got advice to get a divorce to save some of our finances, to separate them. Ungodly advice, of course.
Yikes.
We went to our church pastor and his wife, and they basically, that was in San Diego, they prayed over us, told us to stick together through. And that's where God really gave me the peace of knowing that He saved me. He was with me, even though I might not have anything tomorrow to provide for my children. We had 3 kids at the time. We had to sell our house to pay for attorney fees. God provided a very good attorney who was from our church to help us through that, but that was a 3-year process. And there was a lot of injustice and how that went down and why those lawsuits were filed to really destroy our family. And God pulled us through. He pulled us through. We pretty much almost went bankrupt, but we had to move to, we couldn't afford California anymore. We had to move here and start over. But through all of that, we had peace. And I mean, to say that obviously we didn't have we weren't scared at times, and there weren't things in our marriage that we didn't question. It was interesting because when I became a believer, I was so strong following Christ. It was just basically I turned 180, and I said, okay, we're not doing this right. We're, this and this and those things have to change. My husband wasn't walking with Christ yet, and he went on his first men's retreat with the church in San Diego, and they asked him to share his testimony, and he was terrified. He said, "What? You guys didn't tell me you're going to ask me about my testimony. I have no testimony. I have a perfect, career. I worked hard. I'm, have my business, my wife, kids. It's great. Like, I'm sorry. Find someone else." That was October. No, that was like September. In October, the 2 major lawsuits got filed. And
So September and then October?
Yeah, the next
brutal.
God,
Wow.
We were joking. We said, "You spoke and God heard you."
Oh, boy.
Hey, Stender here needs a testimony.
Yeah.
Did he give us a testimony?
Oh,
That's
boy.
another thing. I told my husband, maybe you need to do a podcast about how God delivered us through that. And I remember that Christian friend told me, how Israelites were in the desert for 40 years because they were not following and their hearts were not turned. You need to be right on with God and follow him so you're not stuck there for 40 years in the wilderness. And we did. He got baptized again. He was as a kid, but it wasn't just like that earning to follow Christ. He gave his life to Christ again. He got baptized. We started coming to church, volunteering through all of that. And we moved to Mesa, and church searching here, to answer your question, it was a little tough in the beginning because we were so well connected and felt like so supported through all of our turbulations there. But we came to Via Church for a while and checked that out. And then we said, hey, well, there's actually a church closer to our house, this Red Mountain Community Church. We were scared by the size at first because it was so big compared to what we were used to, the congregation. But then, Pastor Bob was still leading the church. We liked what we heard. Kids really got plugged in pretty quick.
Cool.
Woohoo.
Yep.
All
Woohoo.
the children.
Take another one.
Yes.
Yep, let's go.
They, and it was a Bible teaching church. I came to a couple of like the Moms to Moms group, and saw the message was solid. The teachings was solid, and the people had all the different ministries where we could get plugged in. Church that wasn't just learning, they were doing, they were helping. I saw a lot of outreach, and that really drew us in. We enjoyed being in a church that doesn't only hear, but actually puts their hearing into action and follows that message out into the world.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, that's great. I'm so glad that Red Mountain could be that for you. And I appreciate you serving Red Mountain by coming here and just sharing your journey. I think it's so important for us to hear what that looks like and how it can be so different and God orchestrated and tailored for every single person. So Ryan, is there anything else that you wanted to cover or ask about, or are you good?
I think I'm just struck by the incredible irony of your whole story of just growing up and immediately hearing, hey, look, we're educated and we're going to work hard and communism is going to save us. And look, we went into space and we didn't see God there. And then that kind of not really staying together, and then this idea of like a McDonald's popping up in Moscow, making you go, wait, hold on, is that all there is? And then you end up meeting a guy who is really educated and is all
superior.
About superior education, right?
Superior intellectually.
And so all those things kind of that you were inundated with, he's got some of those things, like, hardworking, smart, but knows and follows Jesus, or maybe not at the time, but knew Jesus. And there's this extra component of like, wait, you can have those things. Those things can be held in tension. And so I just find that really amazing how that story, there's just a lot of irony in the story, redemptive irony, I guess I could say. Not just irony funny, but redemptive irony in that. And it's super cool to see that play out. And Christina is hilarious. So I'm glad she's in junior high group right now.
All
she
right.
asks really good questions.
Does she?
So now I see where she gets it from.
All right.
Discussion time, Christina goes hard.
Good.
Nice.
All right. That's my girl. Yes. And I want to share my favorite verse with
Please, yeah.
Please do.
everyone. And that's, God gave me that verse when we were going through all of our troubles. It was despite all of those uncertainties about our future, we had peace. And that's the one thing that I think it couldn't come from anywhere else but from Jesus, that you look at your life that's falling apart in front of you and everything you work for your whole life, and then you just have peace about it. It's that Jesus that is the only source of that peace. And Philippians 4-7, with a couple of things taking out, but rejoice in the Lord always. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That's totally played out in my life. And, we rebuilt actually our home the way it was kind of turned upside down. God rebuilt it, being Christ-centered, and that's Christ as the center of our home. And all the other things fell into place. My husband does practice law, and he is a very, very good attorney. He's successful. God gave him that back, but now it's all thanks to him. Everything that we do and that we have, and I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey, who always says that, everything I have, it's not mine. I'm just here temporarily. I'm just taking care of God's stuff for him, and that is how he turned our lives upside down for that, and he is the one that's the center.
Well, thanks again, Marina,
Sure.
for sharing all this with us. That was great.
It was my pleasure.
Well, Ryan, what stood out to you from our time talking with Marina?
I just think it's amazing how much God pursued all those little moments, from literally being in like the thick of communist Russia and all of the inundation of Karl Marx and atheism, and just again, some of those things she touched on about the intellectualism and hard work and Sputnik and all of that. And God just really pursued her at every level, and in various stages. And I think it's really interesting to me that her grandma she explained it for a second. Her grandma was a solid believer and would pray under her breath, and would kind of plant these seeds, I think, really when she was a kid, before her even really knowing it. There was just this reality of a praying grandma who tried to live out the faith and tried to be as caring as she could. That had to have done something, at least subconsciously, for her when she was younger. And I really do think that a praying grandma is a big deal. I know for my mom and my grandma, my mom's mom, she's always been sort of a herald of the faith, especially for me and for my mom. And she's a big reason why my mom is a follower of Jesus now. And I think her prayers had a lot to do with me being a follower of Jesus. And even in the Black community, that happens a lot. You talk about how your grandma in the hood will actually pray your grandsons and your boys to grow up in the faith. And praying grandmas are just a really big deal, and it works. So those babushkas she was talking about,
or babushkas.
Oh yeah. I didn't do the right emphasis. I think had a lot to do with even the beginning stages of her noticing little ways that the faith was embodied.
Yeah.
So that was encouraging for me to hear.
Yeah. What jumped out to me, I think, was that I didn't hear in her story that there was like this one person that brought her to the faith.
Right.
There was this one person with this one transformative moment.
Yeah.
And I think that, sometimes when I think about like unbelievers in my life that I really care about and that I really want to help them come to an understanding and acceptance of the truth about Jesus, I think it's so easy for me to put the burden on myself. Like, I couldn't, maybe, I wonder if I'm the only person in their life that's going to tell them about Jesus, and if I don't do it, then they're
never going to happen.
They're not going to hear
no
what they
else,
need to hear,
dude, right.
And so hearing a story like that, I think is really important for us because it relieves this totally fictitious burden that we can place on ourselves. Like we are this big deal that God's going to use us to do all the work that he wants to do in this person's life. When the fact is that there are all kinds of people in their lives, some at various places in their own faith. I mean, like her husband, she said he was an instrumental part, but for a lot of that, he wasn't really walking with Christ, but he was still a part of it. He was still being used. And so I come away from that story and I'm like, man, no matter where I'm at, no matter how little I think I have to contribute, I can just be relieved of the burden of solving all this person's problems and just bring what I have, and just let God take care of the rest,
Dude, that's good. For sure. Amen.
All right, hard left turn into waitlist topics. We're talking about the poll segment now at rmcchurch.org/podcast. The poll for this last month is what is the worst part about spring cleaning? 24 said, I don't know if this is percentages or not. This just says 24 laundry, 19 vacuuming. Oh, maybe those are percentages because then there's a note that says a lot of people left comments saying all of it, LOL. What do you think, Ryan? What's the worst part about spring cleaning?
And so when I think of spring cleaning, I think of a slightly too warm garage that we're trying to organize. And my house that I'm living in with a bunch of guys right now, that's coming for us, the garage organization. And so I can already feel it and I'm dreading it. So it's not vacuuming. I would say garage organization. That's it for me. And pulling weeds.
Okay.
Yep. We got a lot of weeds to pull.
None of these answers really make sense to me. I mean, I generally just trust that the spring mechanisms will work, so I don't bother cleaning them. This is a really weird question. All right, well, that's it for this episode of Living Stones.
Man.
You can follow Red Mountain Community Church at MyRedMTN on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also help us by leaving a review of the show on iTunes, sharing what you think of it so far. Yes, please do. Finally, you can go online to rmcchurch.org/podcast to submit responses to our poll questions and leave questions for the guests featured on the next show. On our next episode, we'll be talking with Gray Leesberg, I'm really looking forward to that, about how God uses the power of community to transform a spirit that has been hurt and broken into one that's filled with peace. You can go online to rmcchurch.org/podcast to submit your question for Gray, and you may just hear it read on the next episode. In the meantime, I'm Peter Franson.
I'm Ryan Broushet.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on Sunday.